I'm joined by Martyn Briggs. He's a consultant covering the automotive and transport industries at Frost Sullivan. Martyn, thank you so much for coming in. We're just hearing from actually Carlos Ghosn saying it's so difficult to predict at the moment the strength of the Chinese market. Now, talk me through how emerging markets are really taking the lead in terms of car making, and I guess the different kind of models that they want compared to what we want here in Western Europe.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Francine. And we're seeing in China, you've mentioned, is going to be one of the major markets up to 2020. In fact, we think that over 25% of sales and production is going to be made in China by 2020. But there are also other emerging markets.
For the domestic market?
For both production and sales. So it's going to be a major powerhouse. But there's also other markets that we think are important. India's going to actually have a very large compound growth up to that point of around 8%. So there are other areas that are going to be growing as well, which is important to note.
But Martyn, these countries want what type of car? Because here we're trying to make them smaller, more fuel efficient. You know, we're talking about biofuels, green technology. In the emerging markets, it's a different story.
Well, it is and it isn't. It's well documented that luxury vehicles are really taking off in both these emerging economies of China and India. But that's not the only area. In fact, subcompact and compact vehicles are still going to account for over 50% of the vehicles that are sold there. So that's something that's really very important to these car manufacturers. There's such a disparity in incomes there that there's still very high demand for the smaller vehicles. So it's not perhaps as much of an emissions thing, but more of a cost thing. And anything that can reduce that total cost of ownership is really important.
I know it's very difficult to tell, for example, also the alliances. You have Fiat over in the US, Nissan really after going after the emerging markets and kind of the regional hub. But which are the car makers that seem to be the most successful because they found a niche where actually they want to buy their cars and they're market leaders?
I think in terms of market share, Volkswagen Group are going to be seen as the main market share holders in up to 2020.
To dethrone,
so I think that's going to be around 12%. Frost & Sullivan predicts up to 2020. So they're going to be the main players. But Toyota are also experiencing quite a lot of growth in those markets, as we said, for the smaller vehicles. So it's something that
for the electric cars.
Well, not just electric,
more
but
fuel efficient cars.
That's something that's going to take off more probably after 2020. We see 2017, 2018 will be the tipping point, perhaps, where we see around 5 to 7% of total global sales could be electric vehicles. But the longer term, that could be up to 100% by 2050. So. And
what about the luxury market? Because Daimler today said that actually it's Mercedes that's doing very well, and there's still this brand desirability, I guess, that sells cars.
They are doing very well, but don't forget they've also lost quite a lot of market share to BMW and Audi, who are really pressing them both in the domestic markets and in these emerging economies. So it's something that they're going to have to work with, and we've seen, I think, one of the most important things to them is the effective partnerships that they're starting to develop. Particularly they've started to partner with Renault Nissan on the downsizing side of things, and also developing new markets in developed economies, things like car sharing, where we're seeing car ownerships actually declining in some of the developed economies, particularly in London. So.
Martyn, do you think, we're still in a very difficult situation economically. Indeed. Are people going to buy less cars? Overall, is it going to be much more difficult for these car makers to survive if they don't get the product absolutely 100% right?
I think you've hit the nail on the head with the product, but I think the sales will still grow. It's just that there's different emerging models, particularly in these developed economies. We see that three of Tokyo, London and New York, car sharing is something that's really going to take off. So
that means buying less cars? No,
not necessarily. It's a different model of ownership. People that aren't necessarily going to buy cars for personal mobility, it's going to be more a mobility on demand. So there's still a lot more members, but perhaps less cars in centralised areas, but it's still a great opportunity to sell those vehicles.
Yeah. Carpooling, that's a new trend. Martyn?
No, car sharing.
Car sharing,
car sharing.
Martyn, thank you so much. Martyn Briggs.
Thank you, Francine.